Someone's pretending to be my wife. I'll catch Susan smiling at me for no reason. This has happened more than once. We'll be watching TV, just the two of us, like always. Then I'll notice with the corner of my eye that she's got her eyes at me, not at the TV. Head turned 90 degrees my way, a frozen smile on her face I can only barely make out in my peripheral vision. Something unnatural about it. And then I turn to look, and she's got her eyes on the TV again. I asked her about it the first time. She denied it. I was afraid I'd sound crazy if I pushed it, so I never asked again. There were other things, too. Susan had a twin sister. Died during the birth. She never talks about it. Just last week, I turned off my lights and closed my eyes. Susan was already asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to find her side of the bed empty. I turned around and she had that same smile by the side of the bed watching me. "Honey, what are you doing?" Nothing. "Honey?" Just the smile. She made way around the bed and nested herself under the blanket like it was nothing. "How long were you standing there?" I asked. She didn't answer, but her side of the bed was cold and the carpet was sunken in the shape of her feet where she was standing. It didn't start out this crazy. For a long time, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but it wasn't. She was not Susan. I started doing these little tests. That's how I made sure. I'd put movies we've already watched on TV just to see if she'd say anything. Started telling her stories that I told her already. She'd smile. Never called me up on it. I asked her, point blank one day. I got home and she was eating fish. Susan never eats fish. Susan hates fish. "Salmon?" I asked. "Tilapia." I sat on the table across from her. She smiled. "I was talking to Principal Dawson about Sarah today," I said. "Sarah?" "Yes, our daughter. Sarah." She chuckled. "Right. What did he say?" "Susan. Our daughter's name is Camille." She stopped the fork halfway to her mouth and rose her eyes at me. Slowly set it back on the plate. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm going to bed," she said, getting up. I slept in the guest room that night, with the door locked. I ran away the next day, took Camille with me. We spent the night at a Best Western close to Needles. "Where's Mommy?" Camille asked just before bed. "I don't know, honey, but if you hear anything, any sound at all, you wake me up, okay?" Okay, I dreamt of a woman just like Susan that night, a woman that wanted the life of her sister, the life she didn't get. Camille woke me up in the morning. She was eating a cupcake. "Did you take that out of the minibar?" "No, Mommy gave it to me." I paused. "Mommy was here?" Camille nodded. "Yeah, she was standing right there by the bed. She was there for a really long time." "Why didn't you wake me up, Camille?" "I was going to, but then Mommy went like this." Camille put her finger over her lips and went, "Shh." I looked down. The carpet was sunken where Camille said Susan had been. "It's okay, Daddy." She was smiling. The following night, we were almost out of the state, at a bed and breakfast by the border. I turned off the lights, tucked Camille in, and waited, sitting in the armchair, in silence. I knew she would come. It was dead quiet, and I was dozing off when I heard the hinges creaking. I opened my eyes and waited. The door came open in slow motion. She came in, no sound but the door. Walked to the side of Camille's bed, that smile on her face. I got up, I went behind her. She couldn't see me, her eyes were locked on Camille. "Come on, honey. We're going home," she whispered. She didn't look back. She never even saw the knife when I plunged it in. The lawyer later would tell me I was awarded no bail, and I'd have to wait for trial at the mental institution. "Capgras syndrome," he said. "It's a delusional misidentification syndrome, not unlike Fragoli, a disorder in which the person holds the delusion that a friend, spouse, parent, or family member has been replaced by an identical-looking imposter." I told him I was protecting my daughter. I told him that woman wasn't Susan. Still, the newspapers all read, "Successful L.A. engineer kidnaps daughter, murders wife." "It wasn't Susan," I said to him again and again. "It wasn't Susan." He said I was looking at 25 to life, but the insanity plea might still come through. They locked me in last night, my first night at the mental institution. Camille is with social services, they say. My room is covered in cushion material, from wall to ceiling, a padded cell, they call it, so I won't hurt myself. Took me a couple of pills to fall asleep. Something woke me up just minutes before dawn. By the time I opened my eyes, it was dead quiet. I went to the door and peeked out through the little window. The corridor was deserted. I looked back. Just by my bed, the cushions covering the floor were sunken in the shape of 2 feet. If you're in bed at night and hear someone whistling, hide immediately. Last night, by far the most terrifying night I've ever experienced in my life. I'm honestly surprised I'm here right now. If I hadn't listened to my instincts, I would most definitely have faced a gruesome death. So please take my advice and hide if you hear someone whistling in the middle of the night. Last night I was super excited as this is the first 2-day weekend I've had in over 2 months. My big plans were to buy tons of snacks, set my recliner up to be own little paradise, and binge watch some Netflix. I know, boring. But hey, I'm 30 years old and I've been done with the party lifestyle for a while now. Anyways, after probably 5 hours straight of shoveling candy down my throat and watching my favorite shows, I decided it was time to get some sleep. It was about 2 a.m., and way later than I've stayed up in months. After cleaning my mess up and shutting the TV off, I brushed my teeth and climbed in bed. After 15 minutes or so, I felt my eyes getting really heavy, and I was in between that stage of being awake and asleep. That's when I heard it. A faint whistling. My ears perked up and I listened closely. It sounded like it was coming from my neighbor's complex. We have very thin walls in our apartment, so it's not unusual to hear him at times, but never at 2 in the morning. The whistle was to the tune of Silent Night. The whistle made its way from my neighbor's to out in the hallway that separated our doors. A feeling of dread washed over me, and somehow I knew I needed to hide. I got up as quickly and quietly as I could and ran into my closet, closing the door all but a crack so whoever was outside my door wouldn't hear the click of the door shutting. "Benny?" It sounded like my neighbor, only his voice was somehow off. What I heard next made my heart pound in my chest. My deadbolt unlocked somehow. There was no way he could have unlocked it, not from outside the door. I began to sweat and was struggling to keep my breathing under control as the most intense fear I've ever felt took over my body. "I'm coming. Benny." His voice changing pitch at the wrong times. My door slowly creaked open. I heard a soft, dragging sound, followed by a heavy thud with each step he took. I could hear his ragged breathing as he neared closer. Then he started whistling again, the same tune as before, only now louder. I was fighting tears as he slowly crept closer and closer to my bedroom. I prayed to God to make this thing go away as I slammed my eyes shut. I knew this thing wasn't my neighbor, or even human for that matter. Everything about it felt off. It stopped just outside my bedroom door and didn't make a sound. From where I was in the closet, I could see the entrance to my bedroom door. I wish I had never opened my eyes back up. But of course, I did. At the very top left corner, I saw a deformed head poking around the corner. The top of my door frame was at least 6'12" feet tall, and this thing was hunched over. It was huge. I couldn't make out any details of its face because my lights were off, the only lighting coming from the street lights shining through my bedroom window. I'm actually glad I couldn't see its face because I probably would have fainted out of fear. "Benny," it whispered. I squeezed my eyes shut yet again as I heard it enter my room. I could smell it now, and it stunk horribly of rotted death. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I thought for sure I was gonna die. I could hear it yank the blankets off my bed as it searched for me, letting out a grunt of confusion when it realized I wasn't there. It sat still, panting heavily, as it must have been figuring out what to do next. Then it started slowly making its way out of my room, once again whistling. Once I heard my front door shut, I finally breathed out a sigh of relief, not realizing I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I listened for a few minutes before leaving the closet, and as I sat there, I heard another door from across the hall open. "What the fu—" my other neighbor Tommy shouted after a few minutes. His voice was cut off before he could finish his sentence, and I heard a couple of loud thuds, followed by silence. I ended up staying in my closet the whole night and woke up about an hour ago. There were police everywhere in our apartment complex, as someone must have found Tommy. I haven't been questioned yet, but I'm sure I will be. I can't tell them the truth. They'll think I'm a psycho and possibly suspect me of killing Tommy. I'm going to lie and tell them I was asleep and act like I have no idea what's going. If anyone has any clue what this thing is and what I can do to make sure it doesn't come back, I'd really appreciate it. I have a feeling it will be back tonight, and I'm completely terrified.
I emailed my son's Christmas list to Santa. I didn't expect to get a response. I want some Hot Wheels, a stuffed iguana, and... My 6-year-old son Jeff sat on the bed next to me, thinking. I was typing up my son's Christmas list on my laptop, preparing to email it to Santa. Of course, I was merely going to send it to myself. I didn't trust any of those email addresses claimed to be run by the real Santa, and I wanted to play it safe just in case some creep was trying to use parents' email addresses to stalk their children. "Is that it?" I asked Jeff. He was always a low-maintenance child and never demanded a whole lot. Jeff nodded. "That's all I can think of," he said. I smiled and sent the email before closing my laptop. "Now we just need to wait until Christmas morning," I told Jeff. He smiled as he jumped off my bed and ran off to play with his toys. The next morning, while Jeff was at school, I checked my email and was surprised to see a message titled, "Your son's Christmas list," from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it up. "Hi, Christina. I saw your son's Christmas list, and there's no need to buy those Hot Wheels or that stuffed iguana yourself like with last year's gifts. I can send it right to you, and you can give it to him on Christmas. I can also confirm Jeff has been a good boy this year, one of the best I've seen. Signed, Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho." I was confused. Who was this? How did they know my name or email? How did they know my son's name for that matter, or what he wanted? I told myself it was just one of my friends from work playing along. Yeah, that was it. Yesterday I had chatted with some of my friends over texting about what our kids wanted for Christmas, so one of them had probably just made a new account to add to the fun. I deleted the email and went back to my usual business. Shortly after Christmas break began, I sent Jeff over to a friend's house while I went to the store and bought the toys he had asked for, along with some wrapping paper. After heading home, I checked my email again and noticed a new message from the same mysterious address that had emailed me last time. "Hi, Christina. I saw you went out and bought the gifts that I said I'd bring myself. That's okay. I'll bring my own surprise gift for Jeff instead. See, I've been a little short on elves this season, and I've been looking for new recruits to help me make toys. Jeff is such a good little boy. He'll make a perfect elf. Hope you don't mind me taking him up to the North Pole on Christmas Day. I promise I'll bring him down every now and then to visit." Signed, Santa Claus. My heart sank. I hadn't told any of my work friends that I had bought the gifts yet. Something weird was definitely going on. I decided to write a response back, angrily demanding whoever this person was to tell me who they were, why they were stalking me and my son, and informing him to stay the fuck away from us or I would call the police. A few days went by with no response. I felt relieved, thinking the guy had finally got the memo and decided to leave us alone, and I completely forgot about it until Christmas Day. While Jeff was asleep during the night of the 24th, I wrapped up the presents and put them under the tree, as per tradition. The next morning, while I was still in bed, I expected to hear Jeff excitedly shouting from the living room that Santa came. I was surprised to hear absolutely nothing, not a single peep. I checked the clock. It was 8 in the morning. Strange, I'd usually expect Jeff to be up earlier than that, especially since it was the happiest time of year for a child. A few minutes passed, and I quickly became concerned. I decided to go downstairs to Jeff's room and check up on him to see if he was okay. I knocked on his door before cautiously peeking in. He was laying in his bed, the blanket pulled up to his head, and his back facing me. "Jeff?" I asked. He replied with a weird grunting sound. Was he sick? I walked over to him and rubbed his head. "Jeff, get up. Santa came. I stopped when I felt a pair of weird bumps on his head, buried underneath his hair. Jeff then turned his head to me, and I jumped in shock. His ears were pointed and covered in hair. His face was stretched out like a dog's muzzle. He grunted again and stuck one arm out from under the blankets. Instead of a hand on the end, there was a furry brown hoof like that of a goat. My face turned pale as I stared in shock, unable to speak or move upon seeing my son's current state. At that moment, I heard a knock on the door. I ran upstairs, desperately hoping it was one of my friends from work who could help. I looked through the peephole and noticed an unfamiliar figure standing at the door. He was overweight, with a red jacket and a long white beard. Thankfully, I had locked the door, so the man couldn't come in even if he wanted to. I then remembered the weird emails from this month, so I pulled out my phone and opened up my web browser. There was an email from last night, sent from the mysterious address. I opened it up, and what I saw nearly made me faint. I just stood there reading the message over and over again, trying to process everything as the man at the door continued to knock. "Hi, Christina. Since you turned down my request to make Jeff into one of my elves, I decided Jeff would make a good reindeer instead. My current reindeer are getting too old to pull the sleigh, and I need just one more kid to complete my new team. I'll be coming over tomorrow morning to pick him up. Signed, Santa Claus."
Someone sends me pictures of my dead son. 5 seconds and my entire life was sent into ruin. Count it. 1. I looked around, trying to find the exit. 2. There were people everywhere. I could barely move. I was holding on to my son's hand. 3. His hand slipped away from mine, and 2 more precious seconds would go by before I realized it wasn't because he was reaching into his pocket for his favorite toy. 4. I fumbled through my coat for my phone without looking, still trying to figure out exactly where we were in this far too crowded fairground. 5. Dylan? And like that, he was gone. It didn't matter that I screamed. It didn't matter that they caught the giant on camera, one hand over my son's mouth. My son who looked like a rag doll in the giant's arms. It didn't matter that for months I pleaded to the public for help, that the FBI conducted a nationwide manhunt, that Dylan's face joined the long line of smiling children who were never found again. Dylan had been swallowed up by the earth. He had only wanted to see the clowns for his birthday. On the first anniversary of his disappearance, my son would have turned 6 years old. Instead, a man walking his dog in the early hours of the morning found Dylan's body, rotting away in a hollowed-out tree. Clearly, the inspector said, Dylan had been dead for a long time. Frozen, they said. The giant had frozen his body. No one knows exactly when Dylan was killed, but they do know this. Dylan didn't die on the day he was taken. There would have been plenty of time for. I never asked for details. On the second anniversary of his death, Dylan would have turned 7 years old. Instead, at exactly 1 minute past 12 a.m., I received a message on my phone. Unknown number. 1 photo attachment. Only 2 words. For you. I think, in the abyss of my heart, I knew exactly what I'd see when I opened up the picture. Dylan's rotted corpse in the hollow tree. Only, this photo had been taken at night. The edges of the picture were almost completely black, but the flash had thrown my son's dead body into a white-hot relief. Here in front, my eyes were the details I had never wanted. Both the police and FBI failed to trace the source of the message. On the 3rd anniversary of his death, I had a new phone, a new number, a new house in a new state, and a new life. Dylan would have been 8 years old. Sometime during the day, I received a new message. Unknown number. 1 photo attachment. For you. I couldn't help myself. I opened the file to see my son, dead, but not in the hollow tree. Now he was lying on a couch. It was clear he hadn't been dead for as long. In the corner of the picture there was a hand, clad in a black leather glove, a closed fist pointing its thumb in the air. The police were useless. The FBI said that next year they would set up a trace program in case another picture was sent on my son's birthday. That was all they could do. On the 4th anniversary of his death, 2 men from the FBI sat with me as I stared at my phone. For you. Now my son was in the back seat of a car. Clearly, he was dead, but he looked fresher. I hated the word, but it was the only thing I could think of when I saw Dylan, his head lolled to the side, black eyes staring at the camera. A few moments went by before something else became clear. The picture had been taken in such a way that I could see through the window of the car. I could make out details, houses, cars, mailboxes. For one blazing second, I thought this was the slip-up we had all been waiting for. Finally, the giant had made a mistake. We were going to find him. The FBI passed the picture back and forth. Then I saw it happen. I saw the color drain from their faces. What? What was it? I screamed at them. I demanded they tell me. They simply placed the picture on my kitchen table, pointed to the one house you could see clearly. My old house. Dylan's house. More details emerged. Several black sedans parked on the street. FBI cars. You could see a gaggle of reporters on my front lawn. This picture had been taken only a month after the fairground. On my quieter days, when my nightmarish reality retreats for a blissful moment, I take small comfort in the knowledge that Dylan had seen the end far earlier than in my worst imaginings. It is only a small comfort, like having a cushion to sit on while someone flays you alive. Then one of the FBI men pointed to the top left corner of the photo. Past the body of my Dylan and through the back window of the car he was resting in, you could make out a figure. The giant. A featureless shadow, save for one thing. Teeth. A grin. Like the Cheshire cat that wanted to eat the skin off of your face. I don't remember screaming. Now, on the 5th anniversary of Dylan's death, I'm sitting at my kitchen table. I don't have a phone anymore. I moved to the country and took my name off of any listing I could think of. But it didn't matter. He found me. He found me and left. An envelope taped to my door. For you.